Hey everyone, and welcome back for another deep dive. Today we're going all the way back to 1995 to unpack a film that still stirs up a lot of feelings, even decades later. Kids.
Oh, Kids. It's one of those films you don't easily forget, that's for
We're
sure.
definitely not for the faint of heart, right? For those unfamiliar, it throws you headfirst into the world of teenagers in New York City, and not the glamorous side either. We're talking reckless behavior, peer pressure, and a raw look at urban life that a lot of folks weren't ready for.
Yeah, it really stripped away any romanticized notions of youth and hit you with a dose of reality, good and bad. It was like someone pulled back the curtain and said, look, this is what's happening.
Exactly, no sugarcoating. And what's crazy is that Kids wasn't helmed by some industry veteran, It was Larry Clark's very first time directing and the screenplay.
Harmony Korine's debut as well.
First screenplay, can you believe it? Talk about making a splash right out of the gate. I mean, it was controversial for sure, but it ignited discussions and got people thinking, which is more than a lot of films achieve, even with years of experience behind them.
Right, and they managed to do all of this in 23 days.
23 days.
Yep, 23 days of filming on a budget of $1.5 million.
Wow. Talk about working under pressure.
I think that tight timeline even adds to the film's energy. It's almost frenetic, like you're living it alongside the characters.
It definitely has that feeling of immediacy. And speaking of the characters, the casting choices in Kids were interesting, to say the least.
Yeah, instead of seasoned actors, they went for real-life skaters, kids straight from the streets of New York.
It gave the film a grittiness, a sense of authenticity that's hard to replicate. You almost forget you're watching a film. It feels so real. And for two of those kids, it was the start of something huge.
Chloe Sevigny and Rosario Dawson both making their breakout debuts in Kids.
Pretty incredible, right? They both went on to have incredible careers. I can't help but wonder if Kids was this pivotal moment for them. Like it was so raw, so different, it had to have made an impact on their trajectory.
Their performances were definitely magnetic, a huge part of what drew people in, even if they were uncomfortable with what they were seeing. Because, let's be honest, Kids sparked a lot of debate.
Oh, absolutely.
The way teenagers were portrayed, some of the scenes, especially for its time, were incredibly explicit.
Yeah, it pushed boundaries, no doubt. But it also garnered a lot of praise for its realism, for daring to tackle those difficult subjects head on. People were forced to confront what they maybe didn't want to see. It wasn't just shock value, it felt like a commentary on society.
Right, forcing that dialogue. And one of those tough topics was the HIV/AIDS epidemic, which was front and center in the 90s. This was still a time when there was so much fear and misunderstanding surrounding the virus. So for Kids to incorporate that narrative, especially in the context of teenagers and their behavior, it was a bold move.
It was. It brought the issue to the forefront in a way that a lot of other films weren't doing, or at least not so directly. It showed the very real consequences of reckless actions and the vulnerability of young people. But that same unflinching approach also led to the film being banned in certain countries.
Banned in some parts of the world, yet achieving cult status in others.
It's almost ironic, isn't it? You'd think a film that pushes buttons would get pushed back on everywhere. But it seems like Kids struck a nerve with people who felt unseen, who maybe identified with that feeling of being lost and misunderstood.
It definitely tapped into something universal, even if its style was jarring for some. And then there's the soundtrack, such a quintessential part of the 90s.
Oh yeah, the music. Some tracks are definitely more timeless than others. I'm not sure I can listen to all of them now without cringing a little. But back then, it was like the soundtrack to a generation. It amplified everything the film was trying to convey.
Music can really shape how we remember a film, how it makes us feel, and Kids definitely harness that power. So here we are almost 30 years later, and Kids is still a film that people talk about that provokes discussion. It was groundbreaking in its approach to difficult subjects, and those themes, well, they haven't exactly gone away.
Not at all. We're still grappling with issues around adolescence, social pressures, the choices we make, and the consequences that follow. It's all timeless, really. And even though Kids was set in a specific time and place, those core themes resonate today.
And they resonate differently for everyone, which is fascinating. I mean, some praised Kids for its realism, while others criticized it for presenting a skewed perspective on youth culture. It's almost like this battle between realism and representation. Is it a true reflection or a distorted one?
That's a great point. It makes you question how much any film can truly capture reality versus presenting a specific interpretation, maybe even filtered through the filmmaker's lens. It's subjective. So knowing what we now know about Kids its impact, the conversations it sparked? Would you watch it today? And what kind of conversations do you think it would spark in the present day?
It's a film that stays with you, that's for sure. It challenges you to think differently and confront uncomfortable truths. It's a time capsule, yes, but those core themes, those are ongoing conversations. I think people would react strongly to it even now. Maybe it would spark discussions about how our view of youth has changed, or maybe hasn't changed enough. Maybe it would force us to ask ourselves, are we doing better by our young people? Are we listening? Are we providing the support and guidance they need?
Those are all valid questions. And maybe that's the power of kids, right? It's not just a film you watch. It's a film that makes you think,
Yeah.
that makes you question, that stays with you long after the credits roll. So even though our deep dive into kids ends here, the conversations it sparks are far from over. There's always more to explore, more to understand, more to discuss.
Absolutely. Films like Kids remind us that art can be a powerful catalyst for reflection, even when it's uncomfortable, even when it challenges our perspectives.
And sometimes those uncomfortable conversations are the ones we need to have. Thanks for joining us for this deep dive, and we'll see you next time.